members of the Chamber of Deputies to take part in this meeting remotely. On our agenda of the Committee for Foreign Affairs and Committee for Policies of the European Union, we have an informal hearing of the Special Representative of the EU for Bosnia Herzegovina, Ambassador Johann Sattler, who we would like to welcome to Rome. Thank you, Ambassador Sattler, for your willingness to take part in proceedings, and I wish to welcome you also on behalf of the President of the Committee of Foreign Affairs, Giulio Tremonti, who is unable to be with us today, and all the members of the committees welcome you. I also wish to greet Minister Plenipotentiary Andrea Cascone, head of the unit for the Adriatic and Balkans of the Italian Foreign Ministry, and Councillor Martino Bianchi, who accompanies the ambassador. Before giving the floor to the ambassador, I'd like to remind colleagues that Bosnia-Herzegovina has been a potential candidate for entry into the EU since 2003. It has presented an application for entry into the EU on the 15th of February 2016. 6 years from that date, on the 12th of October this year, the European Commission recommended the Council of the European Union to grant the candidate status to the EU for Bosnia-Herzegovina, linking that recommendation to a number of conditions and reforms. The decision of the European Commission has is of historic value for the country and its citizens. There is a joint support for entry into the European Parliament among the political forces in Bosnia. We hope that this can provide momentum to development in Bosnia-Herzegovina, economic development and strengthening the rule of law, which, as we all know, are essential stages for entry into the European Union. In recent days, there's also been an important visit to Sarajevo on the part of the EU Commissioner for Enlargement, Varhelyi, for the signing of an MOU between the Ministry for Security of Bosnia-Herzegovina and the IOM on the intensification of repatriation processes of migrants in context with the European commitment to face the increase of irregular migratory flows. In terms of security, also in light of the concerning situation in Ukraine, of great significance is the decision of the EU Council adopted on the 1st of December to adopt new measures to assist Bosnia-Herzegovina within the European Instrument for Peace, for a total value of 10 million euros. This is a significant contribution which indicates positive developments and an opportunity to respond to the needs of Sarajevo and assist the gradual integration into the European Union of the country. We hope further progress can be made at the EU Western Balkan Summit, which will be held on the 6th of December in Tirana, the first of these organized in the Balkan region. I would like to give the floor to Ambassador Sattler and point out that after his presentation, we will be opening the floor to comments and questions from members of Parliament, and followed by a reply by Mr. Sattler. So I'd like to ask colleagues to inform the chair if they wish to take the floor. We'll also be having very soon with us the Vice President of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Mr. Formentini. So I'd like to thank the Ambassador, and this is a hearing which we consider to be very important, and both members of both committees have urged the holding of this hearing because of the sensitivity of our countries towards the Balkans, and in particular towards the country in the most delicate situation in the area, namely Bosnia Herzegovina. Thank you. You have the floor, Ambassador.
Buongiorno e grazie per l'opportunità di parlare di Bosnia Erzegovina. But I think to make it easier for you and myself especially, I will switch to English, if that is okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for calling this session. I want to thank all of you, dear members of Parliament, to be here today with us here in wonderful Montecitorio, but also online. I see there are a number of colleagues also listening to us and following us online. I want to give you a short state of play where we are when it comes to the situation in Bosnia-Herzegovina. There are things moving. There are quite a number of developments over the last month. And Chairman has mentioned also the discussions on the European level, which are very important in order to give signals to this region, which is so close to Italy, and to give signals to this region and to this country, Bosnia-Herzegovina, that the membership in the European Union is possible, and the road to the European Union is possible. And of course, I'm very much looking forward then to discuss with you and listening to you and having an honest and open discussion. But before that, let me use the occasion and thank all of you for, in your personal capacities, for your interest in this region, and especially in Bosnia-Herzegovina. Many of you had a chance to talk with some of you have been involved in Bosnia-Herzegovina for a long time in different capacities, but also thank you very much that now you are decision makers in the highest organs of the Republic of Italy to still keep the focus on this region, which is so important. Italy has been a consistent and very generous actor in the Western Balkans ever since the war, and has been also putting the money where the mouth is. So not only saying nice things, but also investing. This is on the one hand through your development programs, which you have been running successfully over many, many decades. You are also putting soldiers on the ground. You are an important contributor to the EUFOR force in Bosnia-Herzegovina, a very important contribution to security. And of course, there's also lots of business activities and links between Italy and Bosnia-Herzegovina. You are the second biggest trading partner with Bosnia-Herzegovina. You are one of the biggest investors. And I want to thank you and use this occasion here to thank you wholeheartedly for keeping the interest in this country. Why is it important to keep investing, to keep have Bosnia-Herzegovina on the to-do list, high up on the agenda? Well, first of all, we have seen what can happen when Yugoslavia broke apart. Bosnia-Herzegovina was the country paying the highest price and the heaviest price, 100,000 people killed. Half of the country refugees and internally displaced persons, 2 million people on the move. One of the most brutal wars we have seen on the European continent. So, of course, a grim reminder how important it is to keep focused on this region, Bosnia-Herzegovina. Also because there are other actors. There are actors who are not benevolent. That there are actors who want to meddle and want to undermine what we are doing there in terms of moving them closer to the European Union. We can come to that then also in the discussion. There are the Russian Federation, which has been beefing up its activities in the region, especially in Bosnia-Herzegovina, being probably the weakest link in the region. There is China, there are the Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia. So these are all good reasons to keep investing in this region. The chairman also mentioned migration. We have seen 2 years ago we had a major migration crisis in Bosnia-Herzegovina when we had suddenly more than 1,500 migrants on the streets in the middle of the winter, and the tents burning We have seen the pictures going around the world. So this is another reminder that this is also a migration route. And therefore, another reminder that we need to keep investing in Bosnia-Herzegovina. Let me give you a very short state of play where we are end of 22, December of 22. We had actually, and I've been now in Bosnia-Herzegovina for a bit more than 3 years, a quite constructive period the last 2-3 months. We had elections on the 2nd of October, which were conducted overall in an orderly manner. Yes, there were some irregularities, but overall this was also the assessment of the OSCE. They were conducted in an orderly manner. And the good thing is we are seeing movement in terms of much faster government formation this time. So I'm confident that by January, February we'll have governments. This is record for Bosnia-Herzegovina. Usually it takes a year and a half sometimes, because it's quite complicated, the system as it is. This time around, also because Bosnia-Herzegovina, the politicians know they are under observation because of the discussions in the European Union about a possible candidate status. They are moving faster. The other positive decision we had in October was the recommendation of the European Commission to grant candidate status to Bosnia-Herzegovina without further conditions. I think this was an important signal for the country that although the progress is not what we had hoped for, although it was way too slow in terms of fulfilling the criteria, there are the so-called 14 key priorities, some of which have been fulfilled in the last years, but many of which unfortunately have not been tackled with. So yes, this recommendation has to do also with the geopolitical situation in Europe and with the war of aggression from Russia against Ukraine. But there are also good arguments in terms of giving the signal to the population, to the people, that there is a prospect for the country. There is no need for, as it happens the last 20 years, basically people leaving in droves. We have still huge lines in front of our consulates, of the Italian consulate, of the German consulate, of the Austrian consulate, people who see no future in Bosnia-Herzegovina. Therefore, every investment we can do, every signal we can send is very much appreciated. The other good news we had in beginning of November was the extension of EUFOR. You might recall every year there is a bit of a cliffhanger because of the veto possibility of the Russian Federation. They did not pull that, so we have an extension of EUFOR. And the last piece of good news I would like to mention was the Berlin summit. This is the so-called Berlin process, where Italy plays a strong and important role, which has been important in the last years because it focused on the regional integration, getting the countries of the region closer together again, establishing all trade links, making it easier for people to travel, making it easier also for companies to invest. And there were 3 important agreements concluded at the Berlin summit at the beginning of November on freedom of movement with ID cards, on recognition of diploma, and one on recognition of professional qualifications. Very, very important and timely move forward for the whole region. So this was, in a nutshell, these last 2-3 months, which were better than the rest. And yes, we must not close our eyes that 1 year ago it was a completely different picture. 1 year ago we had a blockade of basically all the state institutions in Bosnia-Herzegovina after the imposition last summer by the then High Representative on the criminalization of genocide denial. We had movements, especially from the Republika Srpska, towards establishing own institutions against the constitutional order. We had movements, at least announcement of maybe creating their own army. And of course this created consequences. This created also consequences on the Bosniak side, who started getting restless, and we had for the first time in a long time again incidents between the ethnic groups. This is something, although there's a lot of political infighting in Bosnia-Herzegovina always, but this in the past did not reflect on actually people, ordinary people, moving against each other. Now, for the first time in a long time, beginning of this year, we saw some clashes again. And especially in areas where there were returnees, Bosniaks coming back to the Republika Srpska, where they lived before the war. By the way, one of the success stories in Bosnia Herzegovina compared with other crisis regions, the return rate is was actually not bad over the last 20 years. But with politicians going in the wrong direction, giving the wrong signals, there was a risk that things could unravel again. Because of different events, including also what happened on the 24th of February with Russia invading Ukraine, and the attention which Dodik used to have from the Russian Federation, being of course then shifted to a different area. But also other signals we sent, the international community sent to the RS in terms of stopping this rhetoric and stopping these secessionist moves, because there will be consequences. There were some moves, especially from the US and also from the UK, to put politicians on sanctions lists. There was also some movement from our side to freeze some projects, important projects for the RS. We also increased the size of EUFOR then, and overall it contributed to calming the tensions and the RS not moving forward with this agenda. So this is, in a nutshell, the state of play. The quite bad first half of the year, and then getting slowly and gradually better, also because of our investments. There was the High Representative for Foreign Policy, Mr. Borrell, together with the President of the European Council, Mr. Michel, inviting all political leaders before the summer in June to Brussels, spending a whole day and a whole night with them, hammering out a compromise, a way forward, a way out of the crisis. And this, in the end, helped a lot to diffuse the tensions and lead to a more stable situation. This is another reminder how important it is to stay engaged. Every engagement with this region and with Bosnia-Herzegovina bears fruit, although it's cumbersome and although it's hard to listen sometimes to the quarreling of the politicians. But without our investments, we would be at risk of losing what we have achieved over the last 25 years. And we have achieved quite a bit. From a war-torn country with half of the population being on the move and being refugees, to the physical scars of the war practically being gone, to institutions which all in all work, with a Dayton constitution which had a minimal role foreseen for the state, now over the years expanded to answer to the needs of the citizens. There is clear progress in Bosnia and Herzegovina. But we've also seen with the events a year ago how quickly we can lose some of those investments. That's why it's so important to give these signals, and that's why it's so important also to use the chance which is there now after the recommendation of the European Commission for the Council, for the European Council, which will meet later this month, 15th and 16th of December, to have an honest discussion. And yes, not everybody is convinced, I understand that. Not everybody is seeing the glass half full, that Bosnia-Herzegovina did not fulfill all the requirements from the list of the 14 key priorities. But overall, I believe it's time now to move, and I very much hope to have a strong coalition of the willing going forward, proposing, convincing also those who still have doubts. I was very happy to hear today in meetings with Foreign Minister Tajani, but now also in the Senate before, that there is support, strong support from Italy, as it was traditionally the case. But I'm also very happy to hear from the new authorities here that there is support for Bosnia-Herzegovina. It needs a coalition of the willing, I said, those who go ahead and make the case for this country. And of course, Italy is best placed to be the one leading the way. So with this, I would like to stop and rather have an interaction with all of you. Thank you.
Grazie.
Many thanks, Ambassador. In the meantime, the Vice President of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Paolo Formentini, has joined us, and I'd like to ask him whether he wishes later then. And so we'll give the floor to those who are on the list of speakers. We have on the list, as I was saying, the Vice President of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Mr. Formentini, will be speaking later. Just a second. 1, 2, 3. This is the English channel. Testing. Fine. So, as I was saying, Ambassador, we've just been joined by the Vice President of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Mr. Paolo Formentini, who intends to take the floor later. Just to simplify matters, I'll be giving the names of the speakers and also the political group they represent. So, colleague Villi, Foreign Affairs Committee from the League, and he's the leader of the League group in the Foreign Affairs Committee. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to thank Ambassador Johann Sattler for being with us. Mr. Sattler, I'd like to seek your opinion on what you referred to previously. Namely, you referred to the interaction between local dynamics and the conflict in Ukraine. And I would like to ask your opinion of the consequences and the offshoots we can expect in this area, Bosnia Herzegovina, in view of the war in Ukraine. Furthermore, Mr. Ambassador, I'd like to seek your opinion on how much the global situation is influencing the local situation, and also how far the local situation in Bosnia-Herzegovina is determined by local factors alone. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Villi. And I give the floor to colleague Boldrini from the Democratic Party Foreign Affairs Committee. Many thanks, Chair. I wish to thank the Ambassador for being with us and also for having put the spotlight on an area which is very close to our heart and very close to us geographically. Often when people speak of the war in Ukraine mistakenly, it's called the first war in the heart of Europe, forgetting that in the heart of Europe there was one very fierce war, the war in the Balkans, which brought to our attention the term ethnic cleansing. So huge violence was wreaked on civilians. Thousands of people have had to leave their homes and their towns and in areas there were minorities. Ethnic cleansing meant that only one ethnic group would be allowed in a given area, and the minorities had to leave. This caused hundreds of thousands of deaths and millions of refugees. The siege of Sarajevo was the longest in history, and also the airlift, which from the Adriatic coast, from Ancona, the UNHCR, organized to Sarajevo, which allowed that those people to survive the longest siege in history. Now, the Dayton Peace Accord is something which we all greeted as the end of a bloody conflict, but the arrangement that issued from it was very complex, even though it was the only one possible. Tension has continued to exist, but we all became very concerned when we saw problems on Kosovo and the Serb minority in Kosovo, which refused to use the Kosovo number plates, and we see now tension in the Republika Srpska, where Dodik, the nationalist leader, is threatening to leave the federation and also to set up his own army. And on this point, I would like to ask the ambassador about the role of Russia in all this. What is the role of Russia behind the request on the part of the Republika Srpska, which has now been quelled, to be an autonomous entity? And what do you foresee this might lead to? Is this a realistic threat, and what would it cause for the Dayton arrangement? What can we expect if Russia continues to support the nationalist leader and his calls for separation from the federation? Secondly, the summit on the 6th of December between the EU and the Western Balkans. We've seen the statements of President Vučić, who said that no one from Serbia will be in Tirana on the 6th. What does this mean? This conference is already dead if President Vučić has decided that the Serbs won't be there. And I wonder whether it's possible to convince Vučić of the usefulness of being at this summit. And finally, Mr. Ambassador, I would like to have some clarification on migration routes, because I see that the Commission has proposed an action plan for cooperation with the Western Balkans to address common challenges. This is the name of the plan. I'd like to ask what this involves, how migrants would be managed along the Balkan route, and what guarantees for human rights would be established if this is implemented. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Boldrini, and I give the floor to colleague Di Maggio, Fratelli d'Italia. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ambassador, for having immediately answered our request to be with us for this hearing. My question touches on a topic you've already mentioned in your presentation, namely the importance of the Balkan route. The Balkan route is one of those which lead a great number of migrants towards Europe, and I would like to ask you what measures are being taken with the Bosnian authorities to avoid a humanitarian disaster and also to relieve migratory pressures on the European Union. Thank you. Now give the floor to our colleague De Monte from Azione and the Committee on European Union Policies. So this is one of the one of our colleagues who was most interested in having a hearing with you. Thank you, Chair, for organizing this important meeting, and thank you, Ambassador, for having accepted our invitation. I have a couple of questions with regard to the Berlin process, which is a very important process, as we know, which began in 2014. There was obviously developments over the years, but as a diplomat, I'd like to ask you what your opinion is on the developments in the Berlin process. And I'd also like to ask you whether you think it could be organized differently, because currently the system is intergovernmental with the participation of the European Commission, the member states, and the high representatives, but not the European Parliament. And is there, and perhaps a different type of organization could be used in view of if Bosnia accedes to a candidate status. Another thing concerning the Berlin process is the transportation community, which was started in 2007 and which refers to the development of infrastructures and which is linked to trans-European transport networks. I'd like to know whether this initiative is working, particularly within the Council of Ministers, because obviously it's not just a transportation mechanism, but it's also has diplomatic importance in promoting dialogue among the 6 Balkan countries. Thank you. We don't have anybody else on our list of speakers. Does anybody else wish to take the floor? No. So at this point, I would leave the floor to the ambassador for his replies. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for your questions and for your interest. I'll start chronologically with Mr. Billy from Lega. First, you ask about the impact, basically, of developments outside of Bosnia and Herzegovina on the situation, the global situation, the overall security situation in Europe on Bosnia and Herzegovina. And yes, there's a lot of impacts because there is no vacuum. We are living in a globalized world. So whatever happens outside usually fairly quickly also trickles in and has consequences on the situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina. When we look back to the Syria war and the issue all of our countries had, but also Bosnia and Herzegovina had, with, for instance, with foreign fighters leaving for the battlefield, for the IS at that stage, which is a huge issue also for Bosnia and Herzegovina. And being very decentral, it was not easy in the beginning to get a grip on the situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina. But since they realized fairly quickly that this is a very, very huge issue for the country and also a reputational issue and which carried a lot of risk, they relatively quickly got their act together and moved against these foreign fighters and these areas they had in Bosnia and Herzegovina from where they recruited people and sent to the battlefield. Fairly quickly they got a grip on it, but just one example that, of course, these situations, these global developments have huge impacts on Bosnia and Herzegovina. Financial crisis, same thing. A rather big impact on Bosnia and Herzegovina, and now we see it, of course, also when it comes to the energy crisis we're having all over. Prices are pretty much the same when you go to the pump in Sarajevo or when you go to the pump here in Rome. That's why Commission President, when it comes to the latter one, to the energy crisis, when she did the trip through all 6 countries of the region, very much focused on how to help the countries in the region to get over this difficult winter. And she brought with her this package of support, €500 million for energy projects, green energy projects, €500 million for the respective countries to help their vulnerable groups to get over this difficult period. So families, small and medium-sized enterprises, every country got support, also Bosnia and Herzegovina. But just as an example that, of course, all this global crisis and developments have a huge impact also on Bosnia and Herzegovina. When it comes to the Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, what was very important, I believe, given that Bosnia and Herzegovina, with its fragile composition and being arguably the weakest link in the Western Balkans, that we reacted quickly in terms of increasing the troop size of EUFOR. So we had been downsizing over a long time. In the old days after the war, we had 50,000 soldiers, many thousand Italian soldiers. This over the years, also because got more stable, got downsized. When EUFOR took over in 2004, there were about 7,000 soldiers left. This went down to 600 this year, beginning of this year. After the invasion on the 24th of February, within 3 days, we decided to go up again with the levels, doubled the size of the troops to 1,200, which was, I think, the right signal at the right time, that we are vigilant. We are watching very much what's going on, and although we don't see any immediate consequences as we speak to the Western Balkans and to Bosnia and Herzegovina, we better be vigilant and be ready to also answer to any challenge we might have there. Um, Madame Boldrini asked about and mentioned the siege. Yes, this was the longest siege, 1,442 long days and nights for the citizens of Sarajevo. More than 10,000 people lost their lives during these 4 years. So I think this is something we always have to have in mind when dealing with this region, that when things go south and when things deteriorate, we all pay a very, very heavy price. Many found refuge here in Italy. In my country, Austria, we had about 100,000 people from Bosnia and Herzegovina who got the asylum status, and most of them actually stayed there, are now integrated members of society. So very important that we keep our engagement high up. When it comes to the role of the Russian Federation, yes, there is this long-standing link, and it has to do a lot with the Orthodox religion, and it's a very emotional link, I would say. Sometimes, you know, when you actually start digging and try to find what are actually concrete steps, not just the emotional stuff, but what is the concrete support from the Russian Federation, there's not so much. On that front, there is not much either, also because, to be honest, there's a surplus. There are many weapons still from the war. There's about 1.5 million illegal weapons in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So there's no shortage of weapons. But if you look at the trade statistics, Russia is nowhere to be seen. If you look at the investments, there is very little investments. Also, the RS especially has been seeking direct economic support, even loans from Russia for many years. There's very little coming. So it's more this emotional link, but of course this has been increasing over the last years, especially with Mr. Dodik having very close links to the Kremlin, and that's why we need to be vigilant. When it comes to the Tirana summit, it's a very important summit tomorrow, taking place in Tirana. I believe, first of all, it's good to have this regular exchange with the whole European Union and the region. We have this with many regions. I was always surprised working in the Balkans for a long time that we did not have this as a regular feature with the Western Balkans. Now we have it. Last year we had the summit in Slovenia. Now tomorrow, for the first time, we have it in the region, also an important signal that we are going to the region and going to Tirana. And I'm very happy to see this development, because we need to beef up our engagement with the region. When it comes to the Serbian president, yes, there was a little meltdown. I think we see this a lot of drama from some of the politicians in the region. What I hear from my colleague in Belgrade yesterday is that actually they are reconsidering, and I firmly believe that in the end they will show up. There will also be the first time that the new Bosnian leadership will be there, represented by the new Serb member in the presidency, Madame Cvijanović, who used to be the RS president. She's now the RS member of the BiH presidency, who will be attending the summit. And on your last point, I think, was on migration, and this was also the question of Madame Di Maggio, the Balkan route and the migration. This is an important route for migrants. We have seen in 2015, 14, 15, 16, how many problems we also got through because of these hundreds of thousands of people coming through the Balkans, and in the end ending up in many of our countries. So in the meantime, most of the countries moved forward in the right direction. When it comes to Bosnia and Herzegovina, there was no migration strategy, for instance. When I came there, it was basically politicians saying, look, you know, there are a few migrants, they come and go, and the problem will stop at some point. So no real understanding how serious the situation is. My argument was always, this is to stay. I mean, the migration will stay. It's not going to go away. So you better get ready, and you better develop a strategy how to deal with migration. And in the meantime, also because we had a very able minister, Minister of Security Cikotic, with whom we have worked very closely over the last years. So there's now a migration strategy in place. We have increased the capacities. There was about 1,500 beds only places for migrants. Now we have 5,000. Many of the migrants want to go up to Bihać area, that's in the northwest of the country, towards the European Union, towards Croatia, Slovenia, Austria, and then Italy. So there are a lot of capacities there now, but also in Sarajevo. And the country really moved forward on that front. Very important that we keep an eye on the human rights, of course, of the migrants. That we work closely there with UNHCR, with other organizations on the ground, IOM, to make sure that there's no violence there against migrants. We have seen, I think the Bosnian authorities overall managed the situation quite well. There are trainings we are doing with the authorities, from the border police to other authorities, that they keep up the European Convention of Human Rights. I mean, this is the Bible, and there are no discounts when it comes to that. Then there was the question of Madame de Monte on the Berlin process. Thank you very much for that question, also because this is part of my life. In my previous life, I was dealing, being what Andrea is now doing in the Italian Foreign Ministry. I was doing back in Vienna, and I was in charge of the Berlin process and organizing the summit meeting of 2015. And I'm very happy, first of all, that the Berlin process was created at the initiative of Madame Merkel in 2014. It was an attempt to give new life to regional cooperation, to bring the countries closer together. Also because the accession process met a lot of difficulties. It was going too slow, and some of the countries were losing the hope that this would ever happen. So I think the Berlin process was useful because it put together, apart from the Western Balkan countries, those countries in the European Union who had the biggest interest in stabilizing this region. So I have a positive outlook on the Berlin process. We managed, apart from these 3 agreements which were done in Berlin now, we managed to set up the so-called Regional Youth Cooperation Office, RICO. So this is the exchange program between the countries in the region. Youngsters, 12-year-olds, 14-year-olds, they go from, for instance, Bosnia Erzegovina to Albania, from Serbia to Kosovo, spend some time in families, live in families, go to school, and come back with a different mindset. This is based on the Franco-German youth exchange, which was one of the most successful examples of reconciliation after dreadful wars. So this is, for instance, one of the very positive outcomes of the Berlin process. Your summit in Trieste, which I attended, was a real highlight in terms of setting up this transport community based on the model of the energy community, which was created like 12 years ago. And it's the attempt to transfer the acquis of the European Union to the countries in the region, with basically, before they even join the Union, that they have the same rules and they have to apply the same rules. A kind of a chamber to get ready for the European Union. The same thing was then decided in Trieste to do with the transport community. They have started working in Belgrade, as you know, 2 years ago, and doing very important and successful work. So for me, to be honest, although over the last years I was a bit worried that it's going down in terms of dynamics for the Berlin process, and it wasn't clear whether after Madame Merkel has left, whether Germany is still an interest in this. I was very happy to see that there was interest. There was a summit again, and next year there will be then a summit at the end of next year taking place in Tirana. So also a signal that we're going to the region, and I believe it was a very positive contribution.
Bene.
Very well. Ambassador, many thanks for your statement, which was very informative and clear, and thank you for answering all the questions from the members If there are any further requests for the floor, if not, I would like to adjourn this meeting. Thank you to everybody.